Good morning. It's the 16th of January 2025, and we're going to go on a little adventure. We're going to be unfolding a fragile map, and we're going to pretend that we're kids again and we find a treasure map, whatever that treasure map might be. But it's a well-used treasure map, and we're going to have to take some precautions on what folding and unfolding does to a map. Let's get our technical details out of the way first. Most of the map part of the elements for this prompt were taken from the Oak Island Xena Halprin map. It's a pretty old map that has some mysterious landmarks and clues. And if you're not, after 12 years, if you don't know where Oak Island is and what it's about, it's basically a, more than a century-long treasure hunt on a little island in the Bay of Nova Scotia. Beautiful place. I've been there, not to Oak Island, but to Nova Scotia. And then we need some mysterious clues to go along with it. And one of the theories is that Oak Island might be the place where the Knights Templar stashed their money. And so we'll bring in some elements that may or may not have anything to do with it. So that's the technical part of the story of where I pulled elements to create this map, which again was done mostly off camera. I'm no cartographer or map maker, and I don't pretend to be one on YouTube, but I did think it was kind of a fun idea to take elements from an unsolved story. Let's tell ourselves a little story about why this map became this prompt. Let's imagine what might happen if mysterious story meets junk journaler. And let's go on a little adventure. Let's imagine ourselves to be in our 20s, not finished with college, but curious stories and interesting history always gets us going, because maybe we had a grandfather who had some interesting bits and bobs in his attic that the rest of the family thought were kind of curious, and they didn't really care about those interesting bits and bobs because the interesting bits and bobs did not seem to go together. But grandfather knew that we were very curious about those things, and while he didn't have answers to give us when we were young and pestered him with questions nonstop, he gave us these things in our inheritance. So what happens when scraps of an old story end up in a junk journaler's hands? Let's find out. So here's our busy young college student, and you saw that she started out with a 12 by 12 piece of craft paper because it's cheap and it came in her Amazon packaging for school supplies or what have you. And she's just going to make use of what she can afford. So she folded her 12 by 12 paper into thirds, starting from the bottom and going up, and then from the top and overlapping, coming down, and then from the left, and then from the right. And she ended up with approximately a 4 by 4 folded packet. And then all the little pieces and bits of information she has acquired over time, she's now trying to figure out, how can I place that information so that if I don't have room to spread this piece of 12 by 12 paper out, say, at lunch, or maybe she doesn't want nosy Parkers sticking their nose over her shoulder and seeing what this secret little project is, she can fold it in such a way that only parts of it show. But she can unfold it in such a way that almost all of it shows, if necessary. I am having such a great time with this project. It took me a couple of days, truthfully, 2 days, to actually make the base of the map and figure out what elements I wanted and how I wanted to incorporate them so as to be able to fold it down into a 4x4 square and so on. And use the tips and tricks that junk journalers use all the time, like gusseted pockets and antiquing techniques and flips and that kind of thing. The one thing I didn't do is actually draw a map, and the reason for that being I'm using an existing story as my inspiration. So I took bits and pieces from that story, as I've said before. One of the challenging things about working on this project within a junk journal is that I had to think ahead 4 or 5 steps and incorporate things that I wasn't going to do for 4 or 5 steps into this base layer, which is why the first thing I did was fold it so that I had a roughly 4x4 packet. And I had to keep in mind that every time I added an element, those folds would go out of line and the packet would become thicker. So I started with that 12x12 base layer, and I pulled out every antiquing trick in the book, short of burning the edges, would set off my fire alarm, and never mind. You get the idea. So instead, I incorporated everything from edge shading to fly specking, and even under my right hand, there is a faux coffee cup stain where our adventurous young college student might stick her coffee cup and not realize that she had stuck it on her map. Who among us have not done that? So I was filming the next part, and that was to make a closure band for the outside, and I heard my camera turn off. And when it turned off, it didn't save footage, so we'll just keep going. What I'm doing right here is making button closures for the band I just mentioned to close or to secure the whole thing. But let me jump ahead and you'll see what I mean. I've got this band, and I'm going to enclose the tails of my brads in a piece that folds back, not unlike a belt. But unfortunately for me, can't find the masking tape either. So I'm going to use frog tape, and then I'm going to glue that flap extending from my left hand over the frog tape to cover the tails of the brads and secure the buttons on each side. And what you just saw me do is cut a piece of scrim tape to strengthen the back of that band, and I'll cover it with some torn book paper, but let's just speed along. I've got most of the elements I need glued down, and some of them can't be put together on my little folio Franken map thing until I figure out if there's any decorative elements I have left to do, like stamping and that kind of thing. So I'm just trying to figure out where everything goes, because after the decorative elements, which won't really show up well on camera, I don't think, I have to do a treatment, and I'm reserving what that treatment is for the very end. So let's just figure out if we have a place for everything and everything in its place. I just realized that I went from speaking in a story narrator mode to first person in describing what I was doing. But let's go back to our actual story, and this is our college student using whatever she can get her hands on to sort of make this thing that she carries around with her wherever she goes and works on wherever she has a quiet moment to solve this puzzle that is made up of bits and pieces that her grandfather left her, as well as new things like the big white map that I haven't really talked about. But we did put at the top of the 12 by 12 piece of craft paper that's our base sheet. If you stuck around this long, let's go back to the beginning and find out what our girl's grandfather left her. One of the things he left her was the Reader's Digest Treasury for young readers, and it contained the Oak Island story. Even though when she got that book, she was very, very young and couldn't read it, she was always interested in the pictures in that book. But like most things of early childhood, it goes into a closet or on a bookshelf and gets forgotten for a while. The mystery treatment that I referred to a couple minutes ago was waxing that piece of 12 by 12. And this is edition 1, as you saw on the outside. The white map is a modern map that shows the plot lines of Oak Island, and the reason I made it a flip out is because it has all the names and the dates of the owners. This is real information, and she can just flip that whole thing out and look at the printing and be able to do research without anybody really being able to look over her shoulder easily and find out what she's doing. I gave her a little bit of long note paper that can be swapped out, and there's some stamping on that fold down that you can't really see because of the wax. But I added a piece of tape that's actually got writing on it backwards, plus that scrap. This is the first thing her grandfather gave her, a map of Oak Island with longitude and latitude. And then below it is a map that got torn, and she pasted it back together because one of her brothers thought it would be a good idea to try and take it away from her one time when they were up in her grandfather's attic. The long piece with the green and red writing on it is a copy of the same map, the Halpern map, with the translation from French, and under my right finger was a translation, and this is a translation from a stone that was found 90 feet down in a tunnel. And then there is a note about 2 different versions of the translation and how the distances and the dates are different, as well as it's wrapped in an author's notes about some facts that he found regarding that stone that he wrote in a book that he consulted with Zena Halpern on when he was using her map as reference. There is a piece that you can't see very well that's a scrap from a book page that has some writing on it, and I highlighted it by putting it on that pocket because it may or may not have anything to do with the Oak Island treasure story. And now you can understand why our girl used a cookie bag and cut it down and made an envelope out of it, because it's parchment paper and it will protect not only the contents, as I said before, but the waxed covering. Now we're modern day for our junk journal, and we need to figure out where this packet is going to fit. And it might fit in one of those pockets that's unused. It won't fit in the tab pockets. And we could make something probably not actually in the journal, but something on the back cover. So let's pull that out and see if we made something on the back cover would that little packet fit? And it will, because I measured it to not be as wide as our book, but it's going to really add some bulk. It's an option. But what if we took it out of the protective parchment paper and just put it in the journal? We could put it on a page and put a belly band or something in there, or a gusseted pocket, but we already have that pocket. We just, did way back in the beginning of Junk Journal January. And it will not, well, yes, it will fit in that pocket, but do we want it there because it is waxed and it will bleed onto that nice piece of paper? Probably not. We're probably going to want to put it on the backboard. Here's our final shot with our packet for our unfolding of a fragile, now you know why I waxed it, map. And it's almost too big for our journal. We'll solve that problem some other time. The whole project was so much fun. I look back and I think, what would have happened if I had taken that prompt list and used the whole prompt list to tell the story of Oak Island or any treasure? It wouldn't have mattered what it was. I chose Oak Island because I had that Reader's Digest book when I was a little girl. And bonus, my hands and that little packet smell fabulous because the wax I used, I made for something. I don't even know what it was. It might not even be wax. It might actually have been made as like a hand protection. I just don't remember what I made it for, but it smells great. And so, forevermore, this little project is going to smell great. I hope that you liked this little fanciful story about a young lady in college who, might be a junk journaler, and how she used what she had in order to sort of conceal all the things that she was carrying with her all the time to work on a project that reminds her of her grandfather.